What's cracking, everyone? It's VenomousStare back with StarCraft 2 action. This time we have Neuro once again in the top right of Defender's Landing. Playing Zerg as he very frequently does. Sometimes I see him slip in some Protoss, but he's a Zerg at heart. He's facing off against a Korean player, a very cheesy player actually, a guy named Tails, who used to be on a team called MVP and has played in several GSLs. Now Tails is pretty much the epitome of a cheesy Protoss. He does all the dirty tricks in the book, and he loves 2-base all-ins. He's one of the few Korean Protosses who really like to cannon rush a lot. I would say him and MC were probably like the two most noteworthy cannon rushers. And Tails had a rivalry with Idra where they would go back and forth, because Tails had streaks where he would play on the NA ladder, and he would often feud with Idra because his play style, of course, contradicted that of Greg Idrefield's the macro machine. So it will be interesting to see whether or not Tails elects to go for a long macro game or some sort of timing attack. In Legacy of the Void, I feel like a significantly lower amount of the games are ended with timing attacks. And even if Protoss players elect to be aggressive or do these builds that some people would consider all-in, Legacy of the Void features more games that kind of go into the mid-game where even if they don't kill one player, then they're crippled and can continue into the game. Whereas before, in Heart of the Swarm and Wings of Liberty, especially with like the Immortal Sentry pushes and stuff like that, it was very, very like one-sided, and it just snowballed out of control a lot of times. Stalker comes out here for Tails. This is a trademark move of a guy who's trying to hide information, is getting out a very quick Stalker. Neuro has 2 Lings though, so he's going to run in and find it, and he might even get a probe for his trouble. Mothership Core comes over. Tails tries to micro away, but he does lose the probe. And Neuro sees this Twilight. This is so important. Stalker will start to work on this cooling tower. Notice 500 HP, 0 armor, so this will actually go down really quick. Adept as well. Twilight's going to finish, so it'll be interesting to see whether Tails goes for like DT drop or mass adept. When I say DT drop, I guess I really mean Archon drop, because most people like make the Dark Shrine and then just go, okay, here come the 2 Archons. It seems foolish to me that people wouldn't just try like a DT drop first and then do the Archon thing. But we can see the Zerg player Neuro has a lot of drones, and there is Chrono Boost occurring here onto the Twilight. So in Legacy of the Void, this very frequently means Adept all-in. Back in the past, that would usually mean Blink all-in. Sometimes it would mean Charge Lot, but very frequently it was Blink, almost always I would say. But now whenever you see Chrono Boost going down on the Twilight in ZVP with just 2 bases, very frequently it can be an Adept all-in. A lot of times we see Warp Prism with Adept, sometimes we just see Proxy Pylon. Tails, of course, has the Stalker on patrol to deny scouting. Great move there. So the Adept pressure is going to begin, and the Zerg player Neuro does see it. A couple Lings go down, and the rush distance on this map, now I haven't played the maps a whole lot just yet, but the rush distance on this map seems relatively short. Kind of clunky here with like these middle rocks, but Phase Shades into the 3rd base, a little bit aggressive there. There are Queens here, and the Protoss player does have Resonating Glaives, and in a typical abusive... Oh my god, this is so abusive. I saw this on the production tab and got tongue-tied. He's going 2-star, guys. 2 Stargate behind this, so what do you do whenever your Warp Prism, or not your Warp Prism, your Adept Opener fails? You go into 2-star. And Tails is going to really kill not much, just 5 workers, and I was so hesitant to call this all-in early on in the game because it wasn't really ever all-in. It was just 3 gates, and he did Chrono Boost out the Resonating Glaives, but he did get a 3rd and 4th gas. He is getting a 3rd. Mass Lings are going to run up here for Neuro and unfortunately find a wall, a debris wall, but he will try a Ling drop here, and this can be annoying 2 Phoenix are on the way, but without the Phoenix there, he's going to be hard-pressed to kill off Ovies, and the 3rd base is going to be aggressed upon here. Neuro does have his 4th base already, but we see the 3rd does have Photon Overcharge protecting it, double Photon Overcharge, and Tails has beautiful SimCity in the main too, so that little maneuver would have worked against so many Protoss players. But Tails holds it pretty easily, and with the 2 Phoenix out from the 2 Stargate, Neuro is really in a position here where he's not going to be able to be aggressive. Tails is in a position where he can SimCity up this 3rd base, warp in a bunch of units. Notice that this ramp to his natural is very, very close to the 3rd, even though the 3rd is kind of open. He might be well advised to like make a few gates and a cannon here. Whenever you're holding in, or whenever you're trying to hold a 3rd base like this that's very open, I like to talk about stuff like this when the new maps come out, because a lot of people don't know the concepts. I just copy the Pro Gamer SimCity. So since this map is so big, it would be advantageous for Tails to maybe put in a cannon behind a gateway pylon wall in, so the Zerg can only swing in from like one direction. So if he makes like pylon gate over here, then Neuro can only really run in from over here, at least with Lings. Mass Air on the way for Tails, and he's just harassing here with Phoenix. Neuro already has spores, and it will be full-blown Sky Toss as we see a Fleet Beacon. And this is right up Tails' alley. He's a very abusive player who likes to go for these types of compositions that are very, very hard to deal with. The kind of compositions that almost feel like they're free win if you're Zerg and just get obliterated by them. Mass Phoenix are going to engage the Queens here, but Phoenix usually have to be at a big numbers advantage to take on Queens, and good thing they are, because the Protoss player did go for all of those Stargates, and that's really bad, as these drones came out for Neuro, and this is a Korean player, so he will see those. He is no slouch. And this gateway wall that I was talking about does not even exist, and that is really bad. That's why you want a gateway cannon wall in, because yeah, even if you run in with Banes, Banes can be very, very devastating, and if you have Adepts, sometimes they'll just run through Adepts. But if you have a hard wall in, a lot of times they do have to waste several Banelings on a pylon or a cannon. As it stood though, Tails was essentially just like walking into a torrential downpour with a teacup. That's what he was trying to do there essentially. Whenever you go for these mass Stargate abusive air styles, one of the most important things is to get SimCity at home, because notoriously with these mass air styles, you kind of have this one big unkillable air army that's very, very immobile. We see that he hasn't really reached that point yet. He's very strong with these Phoenix here. He has a lot of map control. This is why we see Phoenix used so frequently in normal Protoss versus Zerg. What I mean by that is, like, you know, Twilight macro games, Robo macro games, not mass air as we see here. 4 carriers on the way for Tails, who has made enough workers here to resaturate his 3rd. And notice, even though Neuro is getting mass Hydra, and obviously he scouted this air, he knows what's going on, he has all these spores, he made extra queens, Neuro is still taking damage. And that's the real pro of making Phoenix, is Phoenix just transitions so well into any point of the game. You can consistently be picking off Gastrones, you can consistently be picking off Overlords. And here's the other cute thing about Phoenix that not a lot of people know, is you can actually make mass Phoenix and get +1 and beat someone who's trying to go Hydra. Now that might sound counterintuitive, and we are way past that point in the game in this specific scenario, but there was a cheesy player similar to Tails named Myung-sik, another Korean Protoss who made it very far in GSL doing cheesy things. And he had a build where he would go 2 Stargate and would make mass Phoenix and get +1, and because the Phoenix do bonus damage to light units and the +1 scales very well because they attack twice, the Zerg would be trying to make Hydras, and you would get so many Phoenix early on where the Zerg player would just be trying to amass 3-base Hydra, and you could always be picking the slow-ass Hydras off when he was trying to mass them up. And of course, the Phoenix do a great job harassing in the early and mid game, as we saw there. So not a whole lot has been going on outside of your standard harass. But now Neuro is going for one of these big Hydra speed bane timings in the mid game. Now this is the standard Zerg answer to I don't want to play against late game air, and I'm just going to try to break you before we get there. Thankfully for Neuro, he picks off some Phoenix. Limiting the Phoenix count is extraordinarily valuable for the reasons I mentioned before about the plus damage to light units. So it's very, very helpful there for Neuro to get those. But the carriers are out, guys, and this is going to be tricky. 20 more bans coming for Neuro. He's committing so much gas to this. He really wants to break the Protoss player right now. And Tails is trying to set up a fourth. I do not think he will be able to hold this without like 5 gates here. Lots of carriers out, but Tails doesn't have any sentries. The bans can just roll in. I do not understand why Protoss players do this to themselves. They go mass air. All they need is like 3 sentries. But as it stands, the Protoss is going to be able to push a lot of the Hydras back. But if we go to the unit count, where are the Interceptors? It's very low. And this is the problem, as Tails fought the entire Zerg army out in this big-ass, wide-open choke. And that was the last thing that he wanted to do. The very, very last thing. He'll come in here with some Phoenix, but he's out of energy. So Tails, and this is a great time for me to drop an Idra quote here. He's doing a lot of cute shit, but he's fucking it all up. As we see, there's no Interceptors left. Really, I mean, there's 8, so that's pretty much as quick as he can make them, he's getting them. And there's not enough energy left on these Phoenix, so he can't even do the Phoenix damage, the Phoenix light damage to units thing. And he has 1-1-1. He's getting 2-2. So his upgrades really aren't even that stellar for Eratos. I mean, 1-1-1's not awful. 2-2's almost done, but Neuro is encroaching onto this natural, and Tails just going to have to go for it as he's been sitting there. And the Interceptors come out, but notice how there's not a whole lot of Interceptors. I mean, yeah, the Phoenix come out and manage to Graviton lift things up enough, but if we look at the Units tab, just 18 Interceptors here. But of course, the Protoss player will hold, because it is Hydras into Protoss air. And what are the Hydras upgrades? They're only at 0-1. Carriers finally got that upgrade, and suddenly the upgrade advantage that was... the upgrades were about even before, and now it's like a crushing upgrade disadvantage, because it's very normal for any sort of air toss style for them to get +1 air attack. You know, no big deal. But once they have +2, since the carrier interceptors attack so extraordinarily quickly, you can just get ripped through. Thankfully for Neuro there, he's about to have a Carapace upgrade. The Phoenix are continuously hunting, and remember, having this many Phoenix, as we see, a carrier might die here, and it does. So Tails loses a carrier there. He might lose another, but the Hydra's running off a creep, so he does lose another. That's awful for Tails. As we see, that is a risk of ranging out with your Phoenix. Phoenix are so good at maintaining map control, they're preventing Neuro from getting drones over here without spores. But because Tails is in a kind of weird... Ooh, mass bans coming, as the bans don't get any connections there. Nice cannons there from Tails. The problem here with Tails is he is going for this truly abusive mass air mix. He's not trying to mix in High Templar, not Stalker, Disruptor, Colossi, none of that stuff. Pure air. And that allows Neuro to just make mass Hydra, because in my opinion, what the most annoying thing is when you're facing Protoss air as Zerg is whenever they have sentries and whenever they have High Templar. And Protoss players, don't prate at me about the gas difficulties that you have trying to make an army like that. I understand. But Tails really could have made 3 sentries, and when Neuro pressed up, as we see the Phoenix retreating, when Neuro pressed up here, he could have been completely cut in half. And that's the difference between all of these Hydras dumping out an insane amount of DPS at once, and only half of them. And because those Interceptors died so quickly, and that was really the crux of the issue that forced Tails back, I think only having a few sentries really would have paid off dividends. And I won't even go into the obvious benefits of having Storm, because I think it would have required him to build a whole nother building and tech to it. But, you know, Storm versus Hydra, need I say more? It's like even a lot of things counter Hydra, almost comedically so, but Storm is probably the most grotesque. An insane amount of Hydras are going to come up here and try to close the game for our Zerg friend Neuro, as the Protoss player Tails is trying to do a little bit of counter harassment, and he's ripping Neuro apart in the main. That's what I was talking about with making so many sentries and harassing. Even if you build spores, the Protoss player can still do a lot of damage to you. So great job here from Tails to always be running around with these Mass Phoenix. Although it is pretty disgusting to see that he does not have either the Carrier upgrade or the Phoenix upgrade. If you're going Mass Air, you really should have both of these. So Tails is in a really rough spot here. I'm just kind of looking for the Carriers and being like, well, where the hell are they? Oh, well, he lost 2 of them. Okay, so there's 6. And, okay, now the sentries are out. That's interesting. A little late there, I guess, but better late than never. So Tails has lost all of his production, the cyber cores, most of his bases, and I think it has been put on display this game why Idra hates Tails so much. He's an aggressive, abusive guy who plays an annoying style, and he's going to idiotically throw up 3 Guardian Shield, or maybe it's just 2, but the point is there are no force fields out now, and suddenly Neuro might be pushed back because it's Protoss Air, but I really don't think so. Yeah, once again, there's just not enough interceptors out. And why aren't there enough interceptors out? Well, quite frankly, I could list a multitude of reasons. But Neuro has done a ton of things right this game. It hasn't just been Tails not making sentries and getting upgrades. Notice that Neuro's creep spread is literally to the front door of the natural. Brilliant move there. Sniping that third was really important. Sniping all of those third workers with Banes was really important. As we see, the Carriers are going to fall, and this will finally be the game, as killing off a Protoss who does these air styles is very difficult. So let's just talk about what he did right before I end the cast. Running in with these Banes was excellent. Now, a really good Protoss player who does these styles correctly will make like a bunch of cannons and maybe a couple gates to protect themselves at the third. This is a tricky map for doing mass air though, because it's so open, at least when you kind of wheel down into the third. So many of these Protoss vs Zerg mass air attempts are decided between like either the third base or the fourth base. Of course, this map's very weird. It has a lot of hills and like this whole thing with the ramp that leads to the third, but it's a new map, so we're still trying to figure out where to take what base. If you enjoyed it, subscribe for more.